at how big this fucking
Wow.
mic is. And the camera's like,
That'll fix
that
it.
looks
There
good.
it is. It was that door. The door is what made you look darker.
good old doors.
There you go.
Speaking of doors, I'm a big fan of the doors. Are you a fan of the Doors, Wes?
You know what? I used to listen to the Doors quite a bit, especially when I first started learning how to play guitar. And and then they did the movie with Val Kilmer.
Yep.
And I loved that movie.
I can't even remember that movie, but from what I do remember, it was Oliver Stone, right?
I think so, yeah.
And then it was just like a trippy movie, too.
It was a trip.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because my house is like, there's a lot of musicians in my home, like my kids. And my wife, she's not a musician, but we for some reason, we just burst into song at our house, and at a moment's notice, it can be like a popular song or a musical or whatever, and then everybody's singing in my house. It's really kind of ridiculously funny.
Y'all play together, too? Like instruments together?
Occasionally, my kids, my youngest son, he's like dynamite on the piano, and my daughter, she plays guitar and ukulele and some piano, and she sings, and my middle daughter, she can sing really well, but she doesn't. Anyway, long story short.
We'll cut that part out so she doesn't get her feelings hurt.
Because you mentioned the Doors, and my son said something the other day, and I just started singing "People Are Strange." He said, "Well, that was strange," and I said, "Well, people are strange when you're a stranger." And then we just bust out into the song. And so, side note on that, I am a rambler, so I tend to start talking and then trajectory will just get all over the place. So you can rein me back in, Jeff. I apologize in advance for that.
No,
Jeff, who is this dude at the end of the table?
Ultimately, welcome to another episode of Jiu-Jitsu by the Train Tracks. We're on episode number 21, and we're on to bigger and better things. I'm your host, Jeff Spain. Got my man James over here in the co-host chair, and in the guest throne for today's podcast is Wesley Reynolds, the owner, head instructor of Vigilance Martial Arts in Fairview, Tennessee. Everybody give him a hand.
Hey, thank you for having me out, guys.
I actually wanted to ask about the Tae Kwon Do part of the school because I'm sure people are curious about what the balance is there, like running two different style programs and
right.
Because you came up in Tae Kwon Do.
I did. Yeah, well, it's funny because I did Taekwondo when I was a kid for a short time. And, of course, if you do martial arts as an adult, you go, oh, man, I just love Bruce Lee. And, everybody seems to, love old school kung fu, Chinese theater movies. At least that was my experience. And growing up watching it with my dad and wishing that I could run up a wall or do something cool, And so when my parents signed me up, we lived in this town near Galveston, Texas, called Baycliff, and it was it's a very low poverty, low end income place. And we were doing. They signed me up in this program, and gosh, the instructor would walk around with a split cane, and if you weren't hitting your blocks, you got whacked with a cane stick, and so you had to get hit or learn to not get hit. And that only lasted a short time. I think it had a lot to do with the economy and where we lived and whatnot. But so martial arts had always been a thing that I wanted to do and to continue. And so when my wife and I started having kids, my oldest son, his buddy, started doing Taekwondo at Henderson's Martial Arts. My son's friend's dad, he and I were good friends too, and so it was an interesting situation because we worked for a ministry. It was a nonprofit, and we just really couldn't afford to take classes because everything that we did was funded by donors, and we were very, very intentional about what we spent money on. And any rate, this good friend of ours, he was so generous. He's like, I'm going to pay for your classes. You guys come train. And the next thing I know, we're training Tae Kwon Do, and then I'm a black belt, and then I'm helping instruct kids.
So what age were you when you actually stepped on?
Interesting. My son was 7, and it was 2006. That makes me 31.
Wow. So really diving into martial arts, you were a 31-year-old when you really.
Well, if I do the math, I was a music major, so I don't really do math all that well, but it was 2001, so maybe I was 36. 36.
Damn, wow, man. That's wild. For some reason, I was under the impression that, you kind of grew up breaking boards and kiosks.
Well, it's one of those things where I actually got to do the math now because now I was 31. I'm sorry, I have to do the math because I'm terrible at it. But I was 31, and I didn't grow up doing it. But at 31, when we started doing it, I was like loving it way more than my kid was.
It seems like a lot of I've had that experience with a lot of my former kid students, and then their dad or their mom gets involved, and that's what ends up being why they stay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because now I'm forced to stay.
Now they're forced to stay, right?
Yeah.
Pick something, or you're going to continue to do this. But I didn't. I started there at 31. That was in 2006, and then I started training in jiu-jitsu in like 2008. And I know that if I had started doing jiu-jitsu first, that I probably would not have done the Tae Kwon Do side. But I really like the traditional martial arts aspect of what Tae Kwon Do brings, especially to our program with kids these days, because so many kids need that structure. They need to be able to have a room that they can walk into where they say, okay, well, whenever we start doing this, we have to stand still. We have to learn how to do that. We have to learn how to focus. We have to learn how to make ourselves stop fidgeting and stop moving around. Take labels outside. I don't care what your label is. I don't care what your doctors have told you were, ADD, whatever those labels are. We're going to give you a pathway to work through that, a coping mechanism, if you will, to make yourself learn how to focus. And well, I love jiu-jitsu. I walk into some jiu-jitsu schools and kids are lined up against the wall, and there's this swagger that comes with it that I think that is missing the structure of traditional martial arts, that I think that people could actually gain a lot from if they had some of that and some immersion into that.
I tell you, man, that really does give you an edge as a martial arts school owner and a business owner. James and I came up to visit Wes up in the Fairview location not too long ago, and had a good experience watching the kids do their thing. I took away a lot of things from some of our meetings that have revolutionized our kids' program.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I didn't adopt every single thing, but for sure the like little rewards, right, for the effort. Yes. Like for doing the things that we're asking. It's that's just good advice for parents and anybody who has to deal with children.
Catching flies with honey instead of vinegar. It's good mentality. It builds it reinforces actually the right behaviors.
It actually does, and it's funny because I see so many people focus on the bad behavior of one specific kid, and what I'm trying to always do is focus on the good behavior of another kid. And I have these little pieces of paper that I've cut out. My instructor back in Houston, Kevin Henderson, one of my best friends on this planet, I actually had a 30-minute conversation with him on the way over here, and he's got a very successful martial arts school. And I learned this from him, little piece of paper that says "way to go" on it. Yep. And so I've got one kid, he's struggling to stand still, but 2 kids down, there's a kid standing there exactly the way that I want them to, and I'll say, everybody come on, look at little Luke over here. He's standing awesome. He gets a way to go. Everybody give him a big hand. And the next thing you know, everybody is standing the way that they're supposed to be.
They want to be the next one.
Because they want to get the way to go.
Right. Yeah.
They don't know what it necessarily means, this piece of paper, but it's the psychology behind reinforcing, positively reinforcing good behavior. And
do you ever crack down on them, though? Or you ever like, it's lapsed, like time for lapse, everybody lapse?
So it's funny because you do have certain, and you probably experience this like in your kids' classes, you'll have a particular night when a certain collection of students come and they're just not locking it in quite like the other classes. And so my Wednesday night kids jiu-jitsu class is like that, and I call it the burpee class. And because they'll start running, and I'll have one of my assistant instructors warming them up, and they're just kind of getting, and whenever they say, all right, shrimp it out on 2, 1, 2, they're supposed to clap and say yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, or whenever someone says something to them, because we do the manners. We want them to use manners at school, manners at home. Excuse me. So we always try to reinforce that. Well, it's like, all right, you didn't say yes, sir. You didn't say yes, ma'am. Everybody do 15 burpees. And the next thing you know, these guys have done 150 burpees, and which is a lot of calories burned. But we had this turned this curve last Wednesday, and I was like, you guys are going to be the unburpee class from now on because we had an awesome class today. But so, yeah, you absolutely have to, with kids, sometimes lap it out, and they should know that sometimes in life people are going to be stern with them. People are going to give them criticism, and that doesn't mean that they're a total failure and a total loss, but they got something that they need to correct and that they need to fix. And as adults, the world doesn't care if you get your feelings hurt whenever your boss tells you you got to go in and do this report over again, or you got to do this task over again because you didn't do it the way that we wanted you to. So the world doesn't care how your feelings are.
Right.
So what I'm trying to teach my kids is this: you have to be tough and ready to take the criticism, and then whenever it comes, understand that even if they were meaning it in a bad way, it's still going to make you better. It's still going to benefit you. You might not want to associate yourself with somebody who's purely negatively critical. Like, I don't want to do that. But even the negative criticism I can turn into a positive thing. So I'm always harping on my kids about things like that. Really want them to grow into adults that are tough and that are that can handle the real life situations. And I always get my parents involved. Right, parents? Do you go to work and your boss tells you to do something? You have to do that over again, don't you, parents? Yes, sir. All right, kids, you're not exempt. You have to do the same thing when your mom and dad tell you to do the kitchen, and you go in to do the kitchen and you don't rinse the plates off before you put them in the dishwasher, and then they get dirty because they didn't get washed all the way. You have to go back and do it again, right, parents? Like, parents, are you going to really go back and redo the work that you expected your kids to do? No, sir, we're not. All right, then.
Yeah, I think it's good. Like, some of the things that I do is a kind of a thank you to the parents. On Saturdays, we usually run stations where we'll set up maybe 8 or 9 different jiu-jitsu related drills, but also some movement type things. And the whole purpose of it is to just burn as much energy out of them as possible. So when they go home on a Saturday and the parents are spending the rest of the day with them, they have a happy little tired baby that is ready to eat and go to sleep. So they, it's a little thank you back to them as well for bringing them in.
Absolutely. And I'll tell my parents that. I'll ask the kids at the end of class, are you guys tired? Yes, sir. Parents, you're welcome.
Yep. There you go.
You're welcome.
And then sometimes, we play teacher dodgeball. We take that big blue yoga ball over there.
Yeah.
And we put a little pepper on it.
Wear them out with it.
But if it's just me here on a Saturday by myself, I need help to do it. So I asked the parents, hey, anybody want to be another teacher and pop their kid? And they fight for the opportunity to do it.
Absolutely. I think if you have a kids program, your parents are obviously your biggest resource.
Yes.
You want them to really love what you're doing, have buy-in with what you're doing. So the more you can involve them in your activities in class, the better. Tae Kwon Do gives a little bit more opportunity in that, where I can have a parent come on and hold a kick paddle if they, if I need an extra person, or hold a targeting pad. And I even, during May and June, because it's Mother's Day and Father's Day, I'll say, all right, parents can get to come to class with their kids for free. And you don't need a uniform. You don't need anything. Just show up and train with your kid. Yeah. And last year it was so funny because I have one kid in Tae Kwon Do, and his dad's a hockey player, and he's holding the bag for his dad, and his dad just kicks him across the room. But and the mom's over there videoing, and she's like, yes, that's what we want. But we're not abusing your kids.
No.
But
we'll cut that part out.
Right. No, it's and
we're letting you do it.
Hey, but sometimes they need to know.
Right.
You gotta know.
Need to know.
Exactly.
They need to know.
But I think that your parents are if your parents are true believers in your program and what you're doing, then they're gonna be your salesmen, and they're gonna go out and sell you more than you could ever sell yourself. Not that you have to. I mean, if you believe in what you do and you love what you do, you don't have to sell it, especially if it works.
But it's more or less the focus in what you're doing, instead of trying to get the kids to understand I'm not trying to do something to you. I'm trying to do something for you.
For you,
because,
absolutely.
Yeah, these burpees may be horrible. This may suck. You may not enjoy it, but 5 years from now, maybe 2 years, maybe a year from now, you'll realize, oh, I am a little stronger than I was before. I'm a little faster. I can run a lot longer.
Well, I can attest, like, when I was younger and first starting to, like, exercise and work out, it does feel like the event of it, like, takes forever, right?
Yes.
And you're suffering.
Yeah, there's no reward.
The whole time you're suffering, you're like, I'm going to die. This is forever. And when it's done, that, like, relief that you feel, like, you're like, oh, like, a lot of times kids or young people in general, they can't, like, fast forward. They can't play the tape to see that once you're done with this, you're going to feel great. You're going to feel gratitude. You're going to feel elevated. I mean, it's yeah.
I mean, it's a little philosophical, but I feel like wholeheartedly, I feel like time moves slower when you're younger. Like, I know
Absolutely.
There's no way to prove it, but I kid you not, like, it felt like as a child, Christmas took 6 years before it would happen.
Right.
And a week at school felt like a month.
Absolutely.
And the weekend seemed to last even longer. But now as an adult, I could go through a work week and it feels like a weekend.
Yeah.
And everything seems to move faster now. So I get it. Whenever a kid's working out for them, it's like, this is taking forever. An hour-long class feels like a whole day event.
You take age, us being older, time moving faster, combine that with how society moves in today's world, right?
It's lightning.
Yeah.
With instant gratification at your fingertips and just like all these things. I mean, it is. It's wild. It's lightning, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now that we're, to wrap up the whole kid topic, we're going to watch a couple kids knock each other out.
I sent Jeff this video, and I got to admit, I just had, I scrolled through YouTube, and first of all, I love MMA, but to see kids do it, it becomes more interesting.
It really does,
kids
because
look amazing.
And they don't really necessarily, a lot of times these kids don't really have a plan going out of the gate, besides the first thing, shoot a double leg or, start setting your jab up. Oh, he's got the back quick.
I'm almost certain this is in Russia.
Oh, yeah, any kind of, like, sketchy fighting probably happens over in the
Like, I don't even know if these kids have mouthpieces in.
Cue the Beatles, back in the USSR.
Look at this, knee to the face.
Wow, knees to the face? Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Damn, dude. But the technique that these kids are displaying right now to
Yeah,
get
right.
out of stuff, and the shots aren't as heavy, I mean, they're still shots, but it's not the same as taking a shot from an adult, right?
Yeah, but you got to think the face that's getting hit isn't an adult either, though.
Yes.
I mean,
It's not as developed.
I would say this is safer than football, tackle football for some kids. If you got a kid that's 200 pounds on the line,
Right.
He's slapping
lays
him in the
your
back
ass
of the
out.
head, Jeff.
But yeah, this is totally legal in Russia.
Oh, it is. Hey, but you got to keep in mind, these kids had to sign something. Their parents had to sign something. Like, they were okay with this.
and it's just will to live. You know, it's almost not even. It's not a
Okay,
game.
so this is where it gets interesting. Like, looks like Faez is the referee.
Man, he's got a
That is a deep one.
deep choke. And he's got a little crucifix trap on his arm.
Yep.
It's so
He's
kids are
gone.
so flexible.
He's gone.
You know, kids are so flexible, they get into weird positions that you would think as an adult, you could never get into that spot. That would never work.
Yeah.
Like a rear naked choke from there as an adult. Think about yourself doing that choke with that arm.
Yeah.
Control.
Well, you know, I just think, like, my son, when I see him, he's got the grossest shoulder, elbow flexibility. Like,
Right.
some kid puts him in a Kimura, he can touch the back of his head
Exactly.
before he's tapping. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm vomiting right now. Like,
Right.
there's no reason to do that, son. Let him just tap. Just tap,
Exactly.
boy.
Years of training definitely limits your flexibility too. Because I feel like when I was in my early 20s, Kimuras. I mean, I could fight out of Kimuras, you know. And now it's if people just cinch the grip. Like, they just do the Kimura grip, and I'm
Absolutely.
locked and loaded with my hand ready
Yeah,
to tap.
ready to
you know?
tap.
Like, yeah, I just don't want to risk it. And, you know, and then if you decide to roll those dice, I mean, you find out pretty quick, you know. It's like, oh, I can't take these risks like I used to.
Exactly. The moment that a student gets an Americana or a key lock on me, hey, good job. That's as far as it goes. I can't even afford for them to get their arm laced underneath because I've already blown both of those shoulders up. I don't really want to live through that rehab again. If I can avoid it because I can tap, then that's what I'll do. And
So you've had surgery
no, but I've had to rehab both of them.
just from wear and tear. And
I've had this. I did some damage on this rotator cuff, and then I had the labrum on this one, and neither one of them were fun. In fact, this one happened whenever when we moved from Houston to Nashville, I took 2 years of martial arts training off. Like, I just didn't train for 2 years. I strength and condition trained and ran. And then I started training at another local school that was not Profectus. And whenever I got in there, I started training with some of these guys that were blue belts, and I realized that they had gotten their blue belts in like 9-10 months, a year, and which seemed a little fast to me. Some schools are, I guess, faster to pull that trigger than others. And I got into this academy, and because it was close to where I worked, and I could go train over at lunch, and I just wanted to train. And right out of the gate, we were doing set the grip, overhook wrap to the lapel, and a guy popped my shoulder, and I trained there for about 6 months, one-armed, because I couldn't move that arm very well, and it spoke to me that, oh, well, if I'm watching these guys not control their roles, like literally the goal of me training there was to get better, but my whole time was spent not trying to get injured or trying to not get injured, and then getting injured because people don't know how to roll or control themselves, or I should say value their training partner. I just was like, yeah, I'm 9 months done here. And I liked the guys, but I literally choked one guy unconscious 2 times in 5 minutes. He wouldn't tap because it was like, oh, we don't tap type thing. And
oh man.
And I'm like, well,
man.
so I don't need you grabbing onto my arm or my shoulder then, if it's that school.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
So how did you go, how did you transition from, so did Vigilance start out as a Tae Kwon Do school, or did it automatically become both?
It's a funny story, James. I call myself the accidental school owner because I had just stopped training over there, and I had several guys that lived around me that were friends that were like, hey man, would you want to get some mats and put them in the garage and we can start doing some jiu-jitsu? You can teach us some jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, I mean, I can. I mean, I've been teaching, because I was basically running my Houston instructor's kids jiu-jitsu program. It was pretty small, and he needed someone to teach that kids class because he was pretty busy. So I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that, and running drills classes. And so I thought, well, I can teach them at least what I know. I mean, I was a 4-stripe blue belt at the time, and felt like I had lost a lot of. As soon as I moved from Houston to Nashville, all the guys that I'd been training with leveled up. They were getting their purple belts, and I was still over here hanging out as a blue belt. But I really wasn't under an instructor or whatever. But I had these guys that wanted to learn jiu-jitsu. And so the funny story is that there was a local Taekwondo school, which is within the building where I'm at right now. And the owner had gotten some new mats. Did you guys ever come by and see those red mats that we used to have in there?
Tatami style mats?
Exactly. Yeah. They're the worst for jiu-jitsu, by the way.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a good little mat burn on the top of your foot from a shot.
Exactly. You're scarred up.
Yeah.
So at any rate, he had just bought a new set of red mats, and he was selling his old ones, and I went over there to see what he wanted for them. And I really didn't want them because they were pretty worn out looking. And he's like, well, what are you looking at? And I said, well, I'm looking at a space. It's about like 20 by 20. I got a pretty good sized garage. And he said, well, what are you trying to do? I said, well, I got some guys that want to do jiu-jitsu. So he says, well, why don't you just come teach over here? He's like, most of my martial arts classes are pretty small. I only run classes like 3 days a week anyway. And you guys can just sublease the space whenever you want. And, I'll never charge you more than $200 a month. And I was like, so you want, he just wanted basically like 10% of whatever I made, up to $200. And I thought, well, that's better than what I've been having mats in my garage, Right. Because my mentality's always been, hey, listen, if I don't want to go get a tattoo in somebody's garage, I may not want to go learn jiu-jitsu in I don't know.
Sure, yeah, legitimized you.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So, but then the next thing you know, I just put a little advert out. I was like, hey, we're going to do a jiu-jitsu class at Fairview Taekwondo. Anybody's interested, come see us. The first month's free, basically. And we had Farrell, one of my blue belts, he hasn't trained in the last year because of COVID and whatnot, but he was like day one. And then my neighbor, you guys have seen Lauren compete, one of the girl, one of my girl teenage students. She's
the one that wins everything.
She wins everything.
Yeah.
Right. She's very competitive, and she loves to win, and she trains really hard. Anyway, her dad was one of my first students. And so then the next month, Todd showed up, and we had another guy, Jim. He was there. And by the time we got into March, we had like 12 people training, and Dana, did you know Dana? He used to train at Profectus.
Yes,
whenever it
lawyer
was,
Dana.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whenever it was Brentwood, still Brentwood. Profectus had not happened yet. It was still kind of the emerging dream, and Dana was purple belt, and he was coming over and training with us because he was an attorney of one of the guys that was training there, and so. He was super helpful, and finally he just said, hey, man, you need to go talk to Jeremy. So that's, I guess that was probably about in April or May that we went and talked to Jeremy, and that's when I started training with those guys and meeting everybody. And
that's wild, man. I didn't know the backstory really about how you connected with Jeremy and Dana. He's a beast on the mat, man.
Yes,
he was
absolutely.
He was a
came
hoss.
in.
I'm sure that was probably like kind of scary, when you get this big purple belt lawyer guy who's like,
he can. It was funny. He doesn't train anymore because he had sustained some pretty significant back injuries. But Dana would come over, and he was very patient with the guys, and whenever he and I would go, sometimes it would feel like it was soul crushing just because he had such a good pressure pass and so heavy. But he brought a lot to what we were doing early on, and it was nice to have another color belt in the room that I could lean on, because when you first start teaching, you open a school, you can feel very alone in your endeavors and what you're trying to do. And I don't know about you, but I have these days where I'm like, we're killing it, it's awesome. And then I have these days where it's like, I really suck at this. I don't even know why I'm doing this. I need to quit. I should quit. But that's how we got associated with Jeremy. And Jeremy was so inviting and so welcoming, and so one of the things that I love about Jeremy is that he gives so much of himself to his students and his affiliates. It's like I just have a tremendous amount of respect and love and appreciation to him for all that he's done to support us, and I know you guys feel the same way. So yeah, I mean, that's what happened. We went over there and met with him April or May, and then we were just in. And am I too far away?
Sorry. No. Oh. I was just going to say, and this is how long, because now here we are about 3 or 4 years later.
Right.
And now there's 4 Profectus schools.
Yeah. Yep.
It's wild to think about how fast, everything kind of came together. Because at first it was just you and me for a while outside of Brentwood. And, we're trucking along, doing our thing. And, then COVID hits. And that was wild.
It was.
Because, who the hell knew what was going to happen to the affiliation after that?
Exactly.
But here we are, and now we're stronger than ever, man. And it's just, I think it's not so much a testament to, any specific individual, but just, jiu-jitsu people.
Yeah.
We're just...
Resilient.
Yeah, I mean...
Resilient people.
We come in here, it's like we lose. We come in here, we lose. We come in here, we begin to understand how to win, and then we love to pass that on to new people, right? And we love to have people come in here and go through those same trials, and because it's a certain level of, it's like what's the analogy where you're on this ship and the ship capsizes and it's wrecked, and you have to take a raft to safety, and you're with all the people who are on the ship with you, and you guys finally make it, and that level of camaraderie you have with them because you almost face death. I mean, that is like what Jiu-Jitsu 101 when you're in open mat, at the end of open mat, everybody's laying on the floor dead.
Yeah.
You're like, damn, man, we
We
did
made
it.
it.
We did it,
guys.
We lived through another one. Yeah.
No, that's an awesome story, man. I never know at what point people meet each other, but it's always cool to hear how everybody kind of, I mentioned, I think, our last podcast or a couple before, where it's just like Jeremy goes to these random places and find people, or people find other people, and they bring them back to Jeremy. It's super cool.
Well, and it was interesting, too, because after I met him, my program, and we affiliated, my program started to pick up. And I thought, because Kevin Henderson back in Houston, he was always asking me, when you gonna open a school? When are you gonna open a school? I'm like, I don't know. And so then here I am, I'm teaching these classes, and I'm like, I might want to open a school. And so I went to the owner of the Taekwondo Academy where we were teaching, and I said, hey, I want to start a kids program. And at the time, I didn't want to come in because he was being so generous. I wanted to honor his generosity. I didn't want to come in and go, well, my program's better than yours, or you know how martial artists can be, especially
humility.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I said, I really want to start a kids program, but my problem is that you don't charge enough for classes. I've been equalizing my prices with yours, and in order for me to go out and get a location, I need to start a kids class, and I need more of your schedule, and I need to be able to charge a lot more than what you're charging, because we're going to offer a premium martial art. We're going to offer a premium product to people that is worth more than what we're currently charging. And he said, hey, Mr. West, I just, want you to know, like, I'm ready to retire. Like, I need a liver transplant. I'm 63. I don't know if I'm going to get one. So he was looking at the end of his life and his own mortality, and fortunately for him, he did get a liver transplant and he's doing great, but he didn't want the stress of having to do what he'd been doing for the last 10 years, and said, do you want to buy me out? And I said, well, what does that look like? I need to see all your bills. I need to see what you got coming in. I need to see what you got, what your expenses are, and can I take over the lease, because we lease the building. And so he sent it all to me, and over the holiday, and I said to my wife, I said, well, we really need to think about this and pray about this, because this is a major life decision. We don't want to just jump into this and it be a mistake, or not do it because of fear or whatever, and miss out on one of the coolest things that we could possibly ever do. So sure enough, that February we took over. And he taught a style of, he had Taekwondo students, and that's when I started doing Taekwondo again, because I didn't want to teach Taekwondo on top of his Taekwondo program. He was a WTF guy, and I had come from the ATA, and so I had a different approach and a different way of doing things. And so it was interesting, because most of the students that he had did not stay with me. I retained 3 of those. One of them recently got his black belt in Taekwondo. Of course, it takes a lot less time in Taekwondo to get your first degree. I equate getting my first degree Taekwondo belt to get my first degree black belt in Taekwondo to getting like a blue belt in Jiu-Jitsu. That's kind of how I equate it. 3rd degree is like purple. And the reason why it doesn't take as long is because traditional martial arts are, systematic. If you talk about systems, systematically they're closed, meaning, all right, this is a front kick, this is a side kick, this is how you punch, and these are where you get to be creative is how you create combinations while sparring or fighting. But other than that, those systems are pretty locked, and you can translate that into a person's body pretty quickly. And then after that, after about 2 years, they begin to look. If they consistently train. Problem is that most people get their first degree black belt, they think, yay, I'm it. No, that's just the beginning. And then they leave, and so they live with this certificate of I'm a black belt, but they're really not martial artists. Right. Not anymore. And the same thing happens in Jiu-Jitsu when people get their blue belt. It's like all this time and energy and work went into getting into my blue belt, and I'm just a blue belt. And I'm looking down the road at it like, you know what I mean? It's like I'm looking, it's just the first belt, really just the first belt. I'm looking down the road at like purple, and how long is that going to be, and how much work is that going to, that's why the fall off rate is so high at first degree black belt in Taekwondo organizations and blue belt, because we're figuring 2.5 years, maybe 3. Sometimes people will take longer.
I know that kind of probably drives you a little crazy, right? Because you're coming from the ATA where things are very kind of black and white, so to speak,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you're in jiu-jitsu and everything's like, well, bro, you're just going to get there when you get there.
Yeah.
Like you just
right.
keep showing up, man.
Well, Wes, it's been awesome having you here.
Thank you, James.
So, once again, this has been another outstanding episode of Jiu-Jitsu by the Train Tracks. As usual, if you enjoyed this content, hit a like button, hit the subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, snatch their phone, subscribe them as well.
Click the bell.